for ourselves, but that we're sharing whatever merit we generate through our practice for the benefit of all sentient beings. So again, the point of the 4 preliminaries is to develop our motivation and our determination to practice, and to develop a true sense of appreciation of the opportunity that we have. So in that respect, the first preliminary is contemplation of the precious human body. And he says this is important because most of us don't realize that something is important until we've lost it. So it's important that we appreciate the rarity and preciousness of our opportunity by treasuring our body as the basis for enlightenment rather than taking it for granted in some way. A lot of what he talks about in this chapter is about the preciousness of the human birth, but the rarity aspect is also significant. But first, it's important that we rejoice at our good fortune to be able to tread the path to enlightenment, that we have a path that will help us discover the truth about ourselves, discover the truth about things as they are. And that it's important that we do so rather than dismissing our body as an inferior material thing. That through contemplating, we come to appreciate how difficult it is to obtain this opportunity. We come to appreciate all of the different causes and conditions that have to come together for our birth to be a precious human birth, and appreciate that this is more than just having a sound mind and body. It's an embodiment. It's our embodiment as humans who have access to the teachings and the opportunity or leisure to pursue them with diligence. And the human body is important because it's the perfect vehicle for following the path. And in this regard, it would be extremely foolish and unfortunate if we let this opportunity slip away. It would be like discovering a treasure on a remote island and then returning home without it, is the example or the metaphor that he gives for this. So basically, a precious human birth consists of what he terms the 8 leisures and the 10 endowments. In the morning, we talk about having a body, a human birth that is free and well-favored. Free in the sense of being free of the things that would prevent us from practicing, and well-favored in the sense of having the opportunities that allow us to do practice. So free and well-favored, or 8 leisures and 10 endowments. And again, he describes this as like finding a rare and valuable gem. So the first of the 4 leisures relate to the different realms, which we could think of either as literal states of existence or even as psychological states. And he refers to the hell, hungry ghost, animal, and the God realms, which I think he also would include the jealous God realm. And the idea is that beings in those realms, or if we wanted to approach it as a psychological state, when we're really completely caught up in one of these realms, that we don't have the opportunity to be open to the teachings because we're so preoccupied with the struggle, the emotions, the projections that go into that realm. That, for instance, if we're caught up in a hell realm of existence where we become so enraged that we shoot our neighbors, that there's no openness, there's not enough stability, too much turmoil to be able to appreciate the teachings. And the same thing with the other realms as well. The hungry ghosts, there's such a hungry ghost realm that there's so much neediness and so much constant search for whatever it is that feel is lacking, that we're needed, that there's no openness, no psychological openness to allow us to appreciate or become involved with the teachings. There's not the stability. There's too much turmoil to be able to practice. So the first 4 of the 8 leisures are not being born into one of the realms where it's not possible to practice the Dharma. And then the next 4, even though we might have a human birth, we could be born where there are uncivilized people, and where, for instance, aggression and warfare or whatever is a mode of being, so that there's not the openness to be able to practice the Dharma. We could be born among people who have erroneous views, We could be born in a place where where the teachings just aren't available to us, where we're not able to access the teachings in any way. And then the last of the four leisures is that we could be born in such a way that we're so mentally or physically impaired that we're not able to access the teachings, that whatever degree of disability we might have would make it impossible for us to practice. So, flipping it the other way, we're born as human beings. We have been born among people who are at least sufficiently civilized that there's not a constant struggle, a constant sense of threat, so much social turmoil that we're unable to practice, that we may have some people around us with erroneous views, but we have some opportunity to connect with people who have something of a proper view. We are born in a place where the teachings are available, and we're born sufficiently healthy to be able to practice, that we're not having to deal with so much mental or physical turmoil that we're not able to practice. So those are the 8 leisures. And then the 10 endowments. The first 5 relate to our personal situation, that we're born in a center of advanced culture, which I guess we could say would be the opposite of being born in an uncivilized place. That we've been endowed with acute mental and physical faculties, that we have the opportunity to appreciate our existence, that we have a sense of moral values, that we have some sense of ethics and some sense of life being more than just a struggle to survive. That we've maintained our spiritual understanding, that we have some sense of something, again, greater than just the ordinary things of everyday life, and that we have reverence for spiritual things. And then there are five of the 10 endowments that relate to the environment that we're in, that we're born in a place where a Buddha has appeared. There are times in history where not only are the teachings not available, but there was no Buddha. So this doesn't just refer to our present time, but if we look at all of history, that there are billions of beings who were born when there was no Buddha. That the Buddha made a gift of his teachings, that he was able to and willing to teach the beings, and that this has been from generation to generation, from teacher to teacher, presented to us over hundreds and thousands of years. That the teachings are still alive, that they're available to us, that they're followed by religious communities, so that we have some support of Sangha, and that these communities have a sense of sensitivity and compassion for the suffering of others. That they're not closed communities, but that they're open to us. So all of these things, all of these causes and conditions have come together to allow us to experience a precious human birth. And if these things, without these endowments, without these leisures, the human body cannot be considered precious. As he says, if our minds are not constantly turned toward beneficial activities, we're fickle and unreliable, unstable. In our understanding, in our effort, and in our view. And therefore, our birth would be of limited benefit to ourselves or others. So again, we're considered to have a precious human body when we're able to listen and contemplate the meaning of the Buddha's teachings. The meaning makes an impact on us so that we're transformed by our spiritual practices and can help others. And when this happens, our body becomes a vessel that can hold all that is precious in terms of the teachings. And with this understanding, we would aspire to commit to spiritual practice without delay and concentrate on lessening the temporary distractions of mundane life, that we're not just simply caught up in the ordinary preoccupations of gain and loss, praise and blame, pleasure and pain, and so on. So all of those things have to come together for us to have a precious human birth. All of the things are what constitute a precious human birth. So with this, he presents some contemplations that we can do, which I think we could do in just a moment. In terms of doing contemplation, a contemplation basically, with any contemplation, it's rooted or founded in shamatha practice. So we would begin with at least a few minutes of shamatha meditation, which allows us to settle and be able to focus on the contemplation. And then having settled, we bring to mind, or in this case, I'll actually read to you some of the things that we're asked to contemplate. And then these thoughts, whatever thoughts strike us, whatever is meaningful to us, then become the object of our meditation, or more accurately, our contemplation. But at some point, these thoughts should develop into a sense of feeling, a feeling of some kind around what we're contemplating. So we begin with shamatha, and then we contemplate the thoughts of the contemplation that we're asked to do, which I'll read in a moment. But at some point, we go from the thoughts to actually having a feeling. Or another way to put it is we make some personal connection so that these aren't just abstract thoughts about something out there, but we actually come to make a personal connection, that we realize that they're meaningful to us in some personal way. And similar to sitting meditation practice, if we become too discursive, too caught up in conceptualization, we can simply begin again and just return to either a moment of shamatha or just the thoughts of contemplation, what we're asked to contemplate. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to contemplate, make the first contemplation on precious human body. So I'd ask people to take a good posture. Whatever you may be thinking about, to just let that go for a moment, and perhaps just work with the breath. Again, as always, particularly the out breath, just because that naturally connects with letting go. And just feel the breath. And then as we breathe out, allow ourselves to dissolve and let go. And just settle into this space and time. And then we can begin our contemplation. Imagine that your body possesses all the attributes necessary for the attainment of enlightenment. All the attributes necessary for the attainment of enlightenment. In so doing, you might think about any one or all of the endowments and leisures, free and well favored. But regard our body as something that we've newly discovered. Regard your precious human body as something you've newly discovered. This body that possesses all the attributes necessary for the attainment of enlightenment. You come to appreciate that. Appreciate that just as we are, free and well favored, that we have all the attributes necessary for the attainment of enlightenment. Contemplate your exceptional good fortune in having found a teacher and a lineage who can give spiritual instruction. and contemplate even further that it's not easy to apply these teachings in our everyday life, nor is it easy to have sustained resolve, sustained motivation to use our time and opportunity to advance on the spiritual path. So, as we appreciate our precious human birth, Prabhupada writes that we should think, I'm going to use this body, this opportunity, by turning my mind to the Dharma. I will do so by studying the Buddhist teachings and then applying them to my life. So through this contemplation, we would develop a sense of appreciation and some sense of what it means when we recite the four preliminaries. Now I must do something meaningful. And then we would conclude by dedicating the merit that we've accumulated to the welfare of all sentient beings. So we could just do that mentally at this point. So again, I think the point of this particular contemplation is to develop a sense of appreciation. That if we think about all that it takes, all of the causes and conditions that have to come together to allow us to practice the Dharma, we have some sense of why it's described as precious and rare. I'll share one way in which I've sometimes contemplated this. When I lived in Boulder in the late 70s, early 80s, Boulder at that time was a town of maybe 90,000 people. And the Buddhist community was fairly large. It was maybe 3,000 people. You had Naropa Institute, you had stories in the newspaper, you had all kinds of talk, you had posters all over town. And every now and then I would meet somebody who had no idea there was a Buddhist community at all, that there was a Buddhist teacher in town at all. I'm not talking about people who would know that Naropa Institute existed or that Dorje Zong Vajradhatu existed, that Choking Trungpa was alive and taught then, and would not be interested because of whatever reason. I'm talking about people who had no idea, bright, informed people who had no idea that such a thing even was available in that town. And if it was that available and people didn't know about it, you can just imagine as you expand to more and more people, more and more territory, again, how really rare the opportunity is that whatever the karmic link that causes us to become involved with the teacher and the teachings, that it really is a precious and rare opportunity. The next section in the book, he talks just briefly about the difficulty of obtaining a precious human body. And again points out that it's only because we possess a precious human body furnished with the 8 leisures and 10 endowments that we can aspire to enlightenment. And that we shouldn't squander this opportunity by allowing time to pass by. But rather we should practice diligently and generate a sense of joy. And he says it's important to give rise to joy when we do this next contemplation, appreciating how blessed we are with the opportunities we have, so that we don't squander the present moment. Because otherwise it's easy for the years to slip by and opportunities may be lost. So we need to generate joy and excitement about our good fortune and allow ourselves to take a good, positive direction. He says it's not helpful at all to think about someone else is better off than I am, I'm too fat, I'm too old. Rather, we should think I'm a good person and I have the opportunity, I have the capacity to attain enlightenment in this lifetime. And he points out what we think has an enormous power to influence how we perceive, interpret, and react to things. It also determines the kinds of things we're motivated to pursue and incorporate in our lives. So how we think shapes what we attend to, shapes how we feel about things, shapes what we're motivated by, shapes how we understand situations. And for this reason, contemplation of precious human birth is important. That if we appreciate our situation and the opportunities that we have, our inspiration to hear and follow the teachings and to engage in meditation will grow and increase. And therefore, everything that we do in our lives will become more meaningful. So it's not just a sense of appreciation, but a sense of joy that we have this opportunity. It's interesting to me that traditionally, in part of the contemplation of precious human birth, is to really, some teachings really emphasize the rarity of this, that just in the human realm, there's however many billions of people in the world, and how few of those billion have, the opportunity to hear the teachings, to practice the teachings, have a life situation with enough freedom to be able to practice the teachings. And then, again, it depends on a person's belief in rebirth and the different realms, but you have billions and billions of animals, billions and billions of beings in the other realms, so that a human birth alone, let alone a precious human birth, is incredibly rare. There's a very elaborate traditional analogy. I think you can read it in the Jewel Ornament of Liberation. I'm not sure I remember all the detail, but the basic idea is that you have a turtle that lives in the bottom of the ocean and comes to the surface once every 500 years. Blind turtle. And floating on the surface of the ocean is a wood ring. And somehow, by coincidence, in all the vast ocean, at some point, this turtle, that only surfaces once in every 500 years and is blind, somehow surfaces and puts his head through that ring that's floating on the surface of the ocean. That is equivalent to the likelihood of a being attaining a precious human birth. So this opportunity is truly rare and precious, if we're willing to go that far. In any case, there's another contemplation that we could do that's fairly short, but again, taking a good posture and just settling into shamatha, settle the mind, just work with the breath, forget about everything I just said, and just settle into present awareness. We could take refuge and generate bodhicitta by simply thinking about or remembering what we say every morning. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the 3 jewels. Connect with our desire to not only be free of suffering ourselves, but to alleviate the suffering of all beings. And then feel a sense of joy in our precious birth and our fortunate circumstances that allow us to study these things and practice these things. contemplate the positive attributes we have in terms of the 8 leisures, free of the things that would prevent us from practicing, and the 10 empowerments, well favored, the things that allow us to practice, from the circumstances that we're in to the fact that the teachings are available to us. We live in a place where we're able to do these things. And feel not just appreciation, but actually a sense of joy, excitement, enthusiasm, however we might connect with practice. We truly contemplate, truly experience, truly feel what it means to have a precious human birth. A sense of possibility. And think, as Trolloc says, I have so many opportunities to cultivate and transform myself and make a positive contribution to others through applying myself to spiritual practice. I'm blessed with wonderful good fortune and shall devote this body to the cultivation of the Dharma. And he says with this that it's crucial that we experience a sense of joy. Which will arise naturally if we contemplate these things. So then, he says we could conclude this with the aspiration that from drinking the nectar of all that is noble and good, may all beings be free of meaningless distractions and purify their conflicting emotions. And again, we could just mentally dedicate the merit of this contemplation, practice, and study to the benefit of all sentient beings. So he ends this section by saying we need to make a determined effort to transform ourselves on the spiritual path in order to transcend the samsaric condition or be free of misfortune, loss, and deprivation. The time that we have in this life is very brief. If life held nothing more than our mundane pursuits, it would be of no significance. Whether or not we believe in rebirth, the most important thing is to make the most out of this life. We need to think deeply about this. If we just grow old and die, we'll have achieved nothing. On the other hand, if we can transform ourselves and do something to help others, we'll have made a positive contribution to the world and will move toward liberation from samsara in this life or later ones. So with that, we conclude the contemplation on precious human birth, and John will talk about the next preliminary, the next reminder.
The question is how to change the spotlight.
I got it, John, sorry.
It's okay. You can do it, do it. Is that better? Am I the...
Yeah, you're spotlighted, John.
Okay. So, the next section has to do with the imminence and ever-present quality of death. which becomes more and more evident as we progress in years, those of us. I've seen so many people die in our Sangha. I used to keep a list of all the people, well, not just in our Sangha, just all my friends, relatives. I stopped doing it about 15 years ago when it had reached around 100 or 150 people, friends, Sangha members, relatives. And it's only increased and accelerated the rate of death since then. So this section starts with an injunction that we need to reflect on the availability and likelihood of death. It can come at any time in so many ways we never thought of. And he says, if we don't reflect on our mortality in this way, our life will simply slip by. And I've seen it so many times. My father came down with a form of cancer and was told that he had 5 years to live. And he deteriorated quite a bit in those 5 years. And at the end, his last words as he died were, "I never thought it would be like this." Wow, what a thing to hear coming out of my father's mouth. And then I had a very close friend that always stays with me. His name was Robin Kornman. Some of you may have seen some of his work. He was a Princeton PhD in Buddhist studies and taught at the University of Minneapolis, and translated quite a bit, and was also a teacher in the Shambhala and Buddhist traditions. And lovely guy. And he was diagnosed with a form of cancer again, and he was given 5 years to live. It was epithelioma, which is a form of, he had, as a child or as a young man, he had helped his father remove asbestos from schools, from the ceilings of schools. And asbestos produces this form of cancer. And when you're diagnosed with it, Johns Manville, which went out of business because of this, had set up a fund, and you immediately start collecting money, which he did. And he took up the piano. He decided to learn how to play the piano in these last 5 years. And a friend of his was with him at his piano lesson. He received the lesson. This is about 5 years in, stood up and died. It just comes without warning. So we need to reflect on this, on the availability and likelihood. It can be an accident that just comes out of nowhere. I had a friend, a Sangha member here in Boulder named Landy Mallory. I don't know if anybody in this room knows him, but his daughter was good friends with my daughter growing up. And one day he just died of a heart attack, completely unexpected. They can come. So it comes at any time. And he says, if we don't reflect on our mortality, our life will simply slip by as we look for the next pleasure, consider the next worry, just on and on as though there were no end. Physical death, he says, though, is not the real end. It is just that one's consciousness becomes separate from one's body and continues on a course predetermined by karma. And this has to do with the Buddhist teachings about death, the so-called Bardo teachings, which, as it happens, I'm scheduled to give a course on here at the Boulder Shambhala Center in September. And it's going to be a hybrid course on, I can't remember what night, I think it's Monday nights. And what these teachings say is that when you die, you go through different stages. There are 3 main bardos in death. Bardo means interval. That's literally what the word means. Bardo means from to, bardo actually, but bardo is the way it's pronounced when it's a noun. And it means from to, from the beginning to the end. So there's the bardo of this class, for instance. But there are 6 main bardos in our lives. One is the bardo of this life, within which are 2 subsidiary bardos, the bardo of meditation and the bardo of, sorry, I just interrupted. The bardo of meditation and the bardo of dream. They are within the bardo of this life. The bardo of this life begins at the moment that you are conceived, and it ends at the time when you contract the condition that's going to terminate your life, whatever it may be. And then there are the three death bardos. The first is called the painful bardo of dying, and it describes how we die. And there are two main phases to this. First is the death of the physical body, which takes place with the falling away of the senses and also the elements, earth, water, fire, and air, and finally space. And this body dies. And the death of this physical body is what Western medicine would normally call death. But in Buddhism, death hasn't been finalized because the mind is still alive and active. And so the mind has to shut down. This is the neurotic mind, the mind of confusion, the mind that believes in an I. And the first thing that happens is that thoughts of aggression move down from the central channel from the top of your head to your heart center. And the second thing is that thoughts of passion, all mental events having to do with passion, move up from the secret center 4 finger breadths below the navel into the heart center. And the third thing is that the two combine with the third poison, which is ignorance. And when that happens, then the mind actually shuts down. And there is a moment there where if one has practiced sufficiently, and most people haven't, most people haven't, then you can actually achieve complete enlightenment. But most people haven't, and they move on to the next bardo, which is called the bardo of reality. And most people don't see that either because they haven't trained. But if you have trained, and there are practices that one can do, especially in the Great Perfection teachings, then you will see everything, the cosmos, reality, and confusion. You see all the peaceful and wrathful deities, and there are 100 of them. And you will see all the realms, and you're enjoined not to be attracted to the realms, but to go towards the peaceful and wrathful deities, which are harder to go to because they're very, very intense. And the realms are more seductive. The realms, the human realm, the God realm, the animal, so forth. And then if you don't stay in that, and most people hardly even see it, it just goes by in a finger snap, unless you've practiced properly. And then, so if you move on from that, you go into the third bardo, which is the bardo of becoming. And there, that's the classic, the famous 49 days, which is figurative because there are no days. It's a dream state, you might say. It has no body to it. It's purely mental. And in this 49 days, you move towards your rebirth. The first half of it, you see yourself in the dream as having the body of the 7-year-old child you once were. Supposedly in the second half, you see yourself in the body of the 7-year-old child you're going to become. Finally, the event that precipitates your rebirth is that you look down and you see your mother and father copulating, and you experience sexual desire. And this draws you, and if you're going to be reborn a man, you're attracted to the woman, and vice versa, and you enter the woman's womb and proceed to rebirth. Now, the idea is that this is the cycle that we are bound to. And mostly what we're going to do is be reborn again and again, according to our karma. And your karma is not, that's going to determine your rebirth, is not necessarily the karma of what you've been done in this life. It's what's called the weightiest karma. So if something happened far back, in many lives back, that could determine your rebirth in the next life. Could be something good, it could be something bad. Depends on what's weightiest. But the idea is that we are doing this again and again. Now, I heard Trungpa Rinpoche give a talk about this. And one of the points that stuck in my mind is he said that birth and death are happening all the time, right now, this very instant. These words come out, they're born, they die. This gesture is made, it's born, it dies. This class begins and ends, it's born and it dies. There is constant birth and death. The death of our body is just simply the grossest example of this. I mean, during your life, you can lose your hearing. I've done that. I'm wearing hearing aids. You can lose your vision, glasses. You can lose an arm, a limb. But when you die, you lose your entire physical body. And that is traumatic. As my father said, I never thought it would be like this. When I was hearing him, I'm going to tell you just something that really stuck in my mind. This was 1970, and he was giving this seminar in Buffalo, New York, of all places. And there was a group of people, and one of them was an elderly woman. Elderly is probably younger than I am now. And at the end, one of the lectures in Q&A, she raised her hand and she asked, "How do you know there is such a thing as rebirth?" And of course, what I heard her asking was she wanted reassurance that her physical death, which was perhaps looming, was not going to be the end. So how do you know there's going to be such a thing as rebirth? She wanted reassurance. His answer, because it's always now. It's happening right here. It's always now. Things change in the now, that's the death, and they change, and that's the birth. Continual. So we're enjoined to reflect on the availability and likelihood of our death at any time. And if we don't, our lives will simply slip by watching television, going out for dinner, whatever it may be, having love affairs, having animosities. And he says, it's just that one's consciousness in death becomes separate from one's body, but the consciousness continues on a course predetermined by your karma, by your habits, by your predilections. All of this it's guiding us now. It guides us in our dreams. It guides us in our mental wanderings, and it's going to guide us in our death when we separate from the physical body. He says our lives are like rivers. They have different courses, but ultimately they end up in the ocean, which is death. Unforeseen circumstances can cause our death at any time. And I'm sure everybody who's listening to this knows someone who's died suddenly and unexpectedly. And even if we don't die soon, when we do, our life will seem like a finger snap. Our lives flash by so quickly. I mean, consider it. I'm 78. It seems like just a minute ago that I was 50 or even 30. It just goes by in a snap when you look back. At the moment, it seems to be interminable. But when you consider the range of your life, no, it happened in an instant. So let's do a contemplation. I think, considering this, the urgency of practicing and of understanding becomes more real, especially for those of us who are watching our bodies decay, fall apart, like machines that are wearing out. I like to say, when I used to buy American cars in the old days, I always figured when a car got to around 75, 80,000 miles, time to get rid of it. Universal joints going, the transmission might go, anything, the rings are wearing out on the pistons. It's just becoming more and more expensive and difficult to keep it operating. I figured 75, 80,000 miles, and I'm 78. And believe me, a lot of the rings and pistons are going. That's really true. So we take a good posture, as always. We take the refuge and the bodhicitta. You can do the short one. Maybe I'm going to put a longer one in our daily meditation so people can see what that looks like too if they don't know already. Longer refuge and bodhicitta. But we say simply, in order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, that's the bodhicitta, wishing them awakened mind. I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, in my heart, I take refuge in the three jewels, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, in my heart, I take refuge in the three jewels. And then we bring our minds into the mind of meditation, clear, aware, awake, ready for anything. It can be shamatha, it can be vipassana, it can be what we do in this class, which is shamatha and vipassana mixed. This is always the way you start a contemplation, and it's the way you end it. This open space of awareness. And then out of this space, or in this space, we rouse the contemplation, which is everyone dies, including me. No one can escape it. Even the universe itself will one day die. My demise became inevitable as soon as I was born. This body is constantly changing, deteriorating, and could disintegrate as quickly as a bubble. Heart attack, for example, comes so quickly. So you can just consider that, and that we have this precious opportunity to practice the Dharma and awaken to reality beyond birth and death. This opportunity is so precious, so fragile, and we forget it all the time and go on to worldly pursuits, entertainments, worries, and then we come back when we practice and when we study. It was going to be short. You could do it longer. There are 4 of these contemplations. I think we'll probably do 2. They're all pretty much the same, having to do with the preciousness of this human body and mind, and the opportunity that we have. I mean, all of us in this room have gravitated to these teachings because we feel that they have truth in them. And that truth is really what can save us from the suffering of death, the ever-present death, and all of its contingencies. So the second meditation is we meditate on the fact that my body is the product of causes and conditions, subject to impermanence. It will cease. I know at least 2 people in our Sangha who just woke up one day and died of heart attacks. And it could have been me just 3 years ago, because my Apple Watch, and this is absolute truth, and I've told this story many times, but my Apple Watch, I woke up one morning and it had a message on the watch. It said, last night, your pulse dropped to 35 for more than 10 minutes. 35. I looked at the watch and it has this thing that measures your heartbeat, and I checked it and it was going up and down, 65, 35, 70, 25, up and down like that, crazy. So I called Apple. I thought that there was something wrong with the watch. We spent a few hours on the phone and they told me to send it in. They would charge me, I think it was $400 to fix it. I happen to have a heart monitor that measures my blood pressure and it also measures my pulse. So I went and put it on. It gave me the exact same readings as the watch was giving me. At that point, it was evening. I called my doctor, who amazingly at home answered his phone, told me to come in first thing the next morning. So I did. Val and I went in. This is March of 2020, just about the time COVID had hit. And I went in and he gave me an EKG and sent me down the street, this is in New York, he sent me down Lexington Avenue to a cardiologist that he found. And I walked in, handed the guy the EKG, it was printout. He took one look at it and said, "You've got total heart block." Meaning, what that means is there are two wires that go into your heart. And the first one sends a signal to the upper chamber, telling it to fire. And then there's a wire that goes from the upper chamber to the lower, telling it to fire. So you get da-dum. With me, the wire from the upper to the lower chamber was broken, completely out of, not functioning. The reason my heartbeat was so erratic was that the lower chamber was still firing erratically, not getting a message, but it wasn't going to continue for long. And this guy told me to go over to Weill Cornell Hospital, and he arranged it for me to get a pacemaker, installed. So I went over, and of course it was COVID time, and they put me in an emergency room in a little cubicle, and I had to wait to get tested for COVID. And by the time I got the test and was negative, it was too late to do the operation. So the next morning, they had me on the operating table, 9:00. The guy looks at me and he says, "Your pulse," he said, "normally it's a minor operation, having a pacemaker installed. It's kind of like having a colonoscopy. They give you something to make you woozy, but they don't knock you out with a total, anesthetic." And he said, "Normally we give you something to make you woozy." He said, "But your pulse is at 25. We can't give it to you." So instead, they gave me a local, just some injections around here, covered my face with a sheet. And I was as lucid then as I am now talking to you. And it went on for 2 hours, this operation. And during the time, 3, maybe 4 times, I felt a jolt in my chest, kind of like when you put your finger into a light socket and get a shock. When it ended, he took the sheet off my head and told me that my heart had stopped 3 or 4 times during the operation, and they had to jolt it, with an electric current, back into operation. And he told me if I hadn't come in exactly when I did, that was his words, I would be dead. I'm saying it comes so fast and without warning at any time. I was walking down the street going to this appointment with Val. I felt fine. Except then I got tired because the heart wasn't working. We took the cab the rest of the way. Geez, you just don't know. So it's time to wake up and practice, to use this human life as best we can. So finally, we'll do this last meditation, this meditation 2. We take a posture, rouse bodhicitta and take refuge. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the 3 jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the 3 jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the 3 jewels. And become present, clear, here. This is the way we deal with this. By coming present, resting in this clear, open awareness that is always here, letting go of ego mind with its thoughts and emotions and cavillings and passions, and resting in this clear, open awareness. And in this awareness, we arouse the contemplation. We meditate on the fact that my body is the product of causes and conditions. That's what it is. It's made out of causes and effects. And it's subject to impermanence. Boy, is it ever. It will cease. And I will experience, if it does, might, mental torments, the conflicting emotions, the fear of the loss of life, discursive thoughts when I don't relate to my body and the body of this world properly. Instead of thinking of your body as a possession you need to protect, and thereby developing distorted views that only increase your mental agitation. We worry, I'm going to go build my muscles, I'm going to lose weight, I'm going to make myself more attractive. Regard your body rather as an instrument on the spiritual path and think, I will make constructive use of this body and train my mind to gain respite from this relentless turmoil. This body is such a valuable instrument. Only the human body can achieve enlightenment. In the mornings, many of us, we do these exercises where we move the winds through the channels and we expel desire, passion, and stupidity through the channels that run up and down the spine. These are the subtle winds. They're called prana. And they move through the channels and the chakras. Only a human being has the necessary subtle body, channels and chakras, the full complement. Other beings are missing essential pieces, the gods, animals, hell beings. And this is another reason why only humans can attain enlightenment, the human body, as well as having the proper mix of intelligence and suffering to motivate them to tread the path. So contemplate the preciousness of this life, the preciousness of this opportunity to awaken from dream. All the dreams are neurotic, repetitive, anxious dreams into clear, appreciative, beautiful awareness that sees the vividness and luminosity and beauty and joy of this world. So I'm going to stop there and we can have a discussion. Let's switch to gallery view if we can. And Dan, maybe you could find people because I'm on an iPad, my computer died. That's something else that died. Was that a conversation stopper? I hope not.
Who could follow that?
You can, Robert.
Yes, thanks, Michael and John. That's leaving a strong impression in my mind, I guess. So, in terms of the death, like the second contemplation, I wonder, aside from keeping impermanence in mind as a motivation to practice, what would you say is something everyone can do to prepare for death?
Study and practice. Study the Dharma, take it to heart, find what's meaningful to you, and practice meditation of coming back to the present moment, this clear, open awareness. There was an interesting injunction in these teachings, too, that Michael pointed out. We're to be joyful. That could be hard for some of us. But we're to have a joyful mind, because a joyful mind is open and available, whereas a suffering mind is closed down and turned inward. So that, what a challenge that is, for at least for me. I don't know about some of you, to have a joyful mind. And the joy is emphasized over and over. The further you go into the teachings, the more so-called advanced, I don't even like that word, you become, the more happiness, it becomes a part of your experience. They call it bliss, dewa in Tibetan, sukha in Sanskrit, and it becomes an essential part of the path, especially in the Vajrayana. Essential. It's not optional or it's like a reward. It's necessary, that kind of happiness, to move you along. And what it is enjoyment and love of the other sentient beings in this world and of the beauty of this world and its transience, which is just heartbreakingly beautiful.
And just to say a little further, I've come to realize that when I recognize I'm not feeling joyful, it means I'm not seeing something in the way that I could or that it's possible to see.
Yeah.
Cody has his hand up.
Yeah, thank you. When at the end of what you were speaking, and you both now just it just got repeated again, like in the last three voices that I heard after John concluded. You said there's this there, and I hear this a lot. You know, that humans are the precious human birth. We're the only ones that can, attain enlightenment. There's that kind of idea, that you're human and you like can. And I wrote down immediately that a kind of question, but a rephrase of that statement that's like, are we the only ones that need to attain enlightenment? Like to actually even get to that joy and to the bliss, there's views that we have to take. If we don't, the joy doesn't show up. The bliss doesn't show up. It's like taking these certain views that is not struggling with this thing. Like we actually need to walk this path in order to even stop struggling. The birds and the things, they don't seem like they're struggling. they don't sit there. There's an ignorance that's like having a good time. I watch my cats and they're not struggling. And the gods, they're not struggling. We struggle. We need this path. We need this enlightenment. And luckily we have the body and the environment too. I'm curious.
Just take what the teachings say, which is that all of us have lived innumerable lives before this, traveling through the realms, countless lives, and that all beings are moving inexorably to enlightenment. Not just human beings, but all beings. But the other beings, hell beings, gods, and so forth, have to die and be reborn at some point as a human being in order to actually achieve enlightenment and awaken from confusion and suffering. This is the standard picture that we're given. All of the other realms lack something. So, for instance, the gods have a certain kind of intelligence and enormous pleasure. But it's sooner or later, it's like you know people who are in the God realm. Man, I remember when I was in 1978 or so, I was doing a lot of business in Aspen, Colorado. And I would drive up there from Boulder and with my friend Greg Conley. And we regarded Aspen as the God realm. I mean, people were trying to be young and rich. And if they weren't, they were trying to be. And a lot of them were young and rich and beautiful. And everybody wanted to be beautiful. It was the God realm, no question. You know, I mean, as close as you get on earth. But it has this quality of people decaying, you know, because what happens is they say of the gods, they're very long-lived, but eventually they get old and they start to decay. And when they do, they start to smell and they start to look bad. And the other gods go, ooh, you know, like this and get away from them. And eventually they realize that they're losing their godliness and they become furious and in anguish. And they're plunged out of the God realm all the way into the hell realm with fury and anger and disappointment that they hadn't really made it, even though they spent so long in the God realm and such a good time. So, I mean, that's just, there are all these stories about the different realms and animals, you know, animals, the realm of stupidity, just a lack of intelligence, doing things repetitively by rote and without, but the human realm, the realm is one of passion and intelligence. That's our failing is passion. It's kind of connoisseurship. You know, we appreciate the difference between that Ch5 1959 and the one, the 58, that kind of thing. So there's extreme intelligence, and that's what allows us to tread the path. But also, we've got all the interior equipment, which none of the other realms have. They lack something. The channels, the chakras, so forth, supposedly. Now, you may think that that's all sort of superstition. The channels, chakras, prana, the winds, the bindus that move through all of this. But I put it to you, all of the systems for describing, for instance, the body, are just set that. They're vocabularies that are developed as part of a systematic vocabulary to describe something like the human body with a particular purpose, medicine. And what the channels, chakras, bindus, and all of that is another vocabulary for describing what can be experienced here for a different purpose.
I'm just going to add as a traditional teaching, if you were to read Gampopa's Jewel Ornament of Liberation, he describes the suffering of all the realms and that, yes, animals that we have as companions or pets within the animal realm live a very pleasurable existence relative to animals that suffer from hot and cold, the fear of being eaten by other animals, just hunger and even to take it a little further, think about animals that are raised in the industrial agricultural complex that live their lives confined in small pens and just go only to be slaughtered. He makes a very convincing case that all of the realms involve tremendous suffering, whether with an idea of liberation or not. But all beings, if they were aware of the possibility, would certainly want to be liberated.
I've got another book that is in the same vein. You see, these are called, Gampopa's Jewel Ornament of Liberation is called a Lam Rim text. Lam Rim means stages of the path. And each of the sects has its most famous Lam Rim text. Gampopa's jewel ornament is the Lamrim text for the Kagyus. Trungpa Rinpoche was a Kagyu. But the Lamrim text that's most valued for the Nyingmas, I like it better. It's Patro Rinpoche's, The Words of My Perfect Teacher. Now, some people don't like it because it's kind of fire and brimstone Buddhism. You know, it's sort of like fundamentalist, but I love it. You can try it. It's a lot more fun than Gampopa's Jewel Ornament, which is calmer, duller, I think. You know, don't you think, Michael?
That also, yes, Patro Rinpoche's book also has some horrific descriptions of the sufferings in the various.
Oh my God, his descriptions of the hell realms will make your hair stand on end.
Danielle has her hand raised.
I was going to say the same thing that Michael just said, that, you know, everybody says, I'd like to be reborn as your cat. I'd like to be reborn as your dog. But, like, I always think, like, I don't want to be reborn as a pig because they are so mistreated in factory farming and, you know, all the slaughterhouses. I mean, the suffering of billions of animals, you know, every year. It just feels like it's a cloud around the earth of suffering. And it's just sad. And also when John says, like, this world is good to be here in this world. And I definitely think for humans, but, you know, I think of different people, like people in war in Yemen and all that. Is their life worth being here for? Are they in the hell realm? You know, is it just worth being here when you're a human? And that's just, I was wondering about that. Thanks.
You want to address that, Michael?
Would you ask the question again? I'm not sure I got it exactly.
You know how it's said that this world is worth being here for,
Yeah,
but I'm thinking like animals or like people in, you know, civil war, genocide, you know, all that kinds of stuff. Would they think their life was worth being here for when they have violence and death and all that stuff? Would they be in the hell realm at that point? Or are they in the human realm? Because I don't know. It just seems like so many people have been through so much horror. Like, would everybody think this life is worth being here for? Unless maybe you're just in the human realm.
Well, I think people find meaning in lots of different things, and I think some ultimately lead to, you know, better or worse situations, I guess. This kind of gets into the next reminder that we'll talk about next week, the reality of karma and cause and effect. So we're kind of foreshadowing that. I think it's important to understand precious human birth does not mean that we should become arrogant in any way. It's really meant to be appreciative and joyful, and that there are beings who, you know, perhaps never encounter Buddhism, but still are able to live lives that, you know, that evince compassion and evince some openness based on whatever spiritual path, whatever understanding they have that is available to them. And that it might not lead to, you know, complete perfect enlightenment, but still would lead to favorable conditions. You know, just as there are people who, you know, hear the teachings and are not able to make use of them for whatever reason. It goes into, you know, the description of the different kinds of students, one of which is a student, like, you know, the different pots. The one is a student like a pot that's turned over, so they never really absorb the teachings, they just spill out. Another is the student where there are holes in the pot, they're not able to retain the teachings and really make use of them. And then there are, you know, students where there's some kind of poison in the pot, so whatever they hear gets distorted. So really, I think the important thing is it comes down to each one of us, our situation, and what we can do with our lives and with our understanding and our practice, and that's really the most important thing. It's and then also having compassion for others, whatever their circumstances might be. I think we'll get into that more with the next reminder, in particular, the reminder about karma, cause and effect. But that's next week. I don't know if that completely answers your question, but that's what I'm thinking right now.
Yeah, my question was a little overgeneralized, so you answered it really well.
I think, it depends on the individual, that there are lots of stories about people in difficult circumstances who are happy. In fact, there was a movie around a while, some decades ago, that we used to watch about a petty shaw driver in India, who was just dirt poor and ultimately happy. And of course, we all know the stories about people who have tremendous advantages, wealth, fame, admiration, who kill themselves, out of unhappiness, commit suicide. So it's really, I think what these teachings are saying is, it's here. It's
Yeah,
here.
like Viktor Frankl, like, is that him who was in the Holocaust?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And search for me.
Search for meaning, right? Yeah, it's really much more in our minds than it is in the circumstances. And that if we have a healthy mind, we can deal with difficult circumstances certainly better and maybe completely.
It's 9:02, and Vicky has her hand up.
I can't see this. Yeah, go.
Vicky has her hand up, so I guess that'll be our last, and then we'll close.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate it. My question is, in the death process as you've described it, is it possible is there any point where we have company, for example, those who have shown us compassion, or sentient beings, and this isn't just people, sentient beings to whom we've shown compassion or have loved, and vice versa, or unresolved conflicts, or what's the company that we keep once we're there, with everything else? I mean, I'm assuming just like here on Earth, we're not alone. There's other beings around. You've spoken before about very luminous beings and very wrathful, but what about anything else? I'm just curious, because you hear sometimes in other discussions of death, not here, that someone's waiting for you on the other side. They'll help you get oriented. Just wondered about those details. I don't know if I asked the question very well, but
You did indeed. I mean, remember, there are three bardos, three intervals in death. The first one is called the painful bardo of dying, is the same name they give it. So it's the bardo of dying, when your body is shutting down. And that's a lonely process. You might have somebody standing next to you and be aware of them, but eventually you won't be. And then there is a moment of complete shutdown, and which is completely alone, but it's beyond alone. It's an opportunity to achieve enlightenment if you've practiced enough. And we won't go into that. There's more to say about it, but beyond that, then there's the bardo of reality. And there, if you can see it, and most people can't, most people just flash right through it, there are all kinds of beings, and you can have relationships with them, so they say. And it's supposed to be really terrific. I have a friend who is really looking forward to the bardo of reality. He hopes. He practices a lot, and he's looking forward to meeting some of the wrathful deities. I do too. I have this guy up here on the wall and another one behind me. These wrathful deities, I'd really like to meet them. Although it might be scary. And then there are the peaceful ones, but they actually say the peaceful ones are more frightening than the wrathful. because their peace is so brilliant and intense that it's very hard to even see them unless you have meditated a lot and can rest in awareness. And then there are beyond that, there's the bardo of becoming, which is a dream state. And you have people that you meet in your dreams, right? So yeah, you might be meeting people in the dreams, whether they're real, who knows, until you're reborn.
Are they people or sentient beings you may have known before?
I think both. Both. Yeah.
If we've
And
had,
if
yeah, we've
you-
had so many counts. Oh, go
If you
ahead.
want to read about this, there are some excellent books. And I could send them out maybe. One is by Punlop Rinpoche. That's my favorite. It's sort of dull. His style is very flat, but it's also very simple and direct and clear. It's called Mind Beyond Death. And then another book that I really like a lot is Francesca Fremantle's book. It's called Luminous Emptiness. Now, Francesca was a student of Trungpa Rinpoche, and she was also a Sanskrit scholar, and she spent her life teaching in London in Sanskrit schools, in universities. And but she came here and studied with Trungpa Rinpoche for a long time. They translated the Tibetan Book of the Dead together. And so if you get that translation, it'll have her name on it. After he died, she wrote this book, Luminous Emptiness, which is explaining the death teachings. The Book of the Dead is not an easy way into these teachings. The Book of the Dead is really a manual meant to be read to a dying person to help them through the process. But it's not explaining the whole thing, the way Luminous Emptiness does, the way Mind Beyond Death does. And the third book that is very popular is Sogyal Rinpoche's book, The Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, which is also quite good. Those three, I would say, are at the top of my list. But I'm sure there are others. This goes back a ways. Maybe there are others that have come out since then. So if you email me or something, I can, just saying you want to know about these titles, I'll send them out to you.
Okay, thank you. The Dalai Lama has also written a book about dying.
He did, and it's not bad. I think these others might be better, in my opinion, but I like the Dalai Lama's book.
So we're well after 9 o'clock. I can put up
Oh,
the
yeah.
chant.
Sorry. Yeah, I can't put the chants up, so.
This class
Okay.
could have that warning, but instead we'll end with the prayer for peace and by dedicating the merit generated through our practice and study for the benefit of all sentient beings. By the blessings of enlightened and compassionate ones, by the power of my positive actions of 3 times and my prayers of pure aspiration, may wars, conflicts, epidemics, and all other maladies dissolve in this world, and may the earth and all who live on this earth enjoy the abundance of well-being. May all learn to live lovingly with each other. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy, wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigdon's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory. Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Good night.
Michael,
Thank you.
John, everybody.
Michael.
Everybody.
John,
Thank you.
thank you.
Good night.
Good
John,
night.
John, you're muted. I need you to unmute. I need direction.
Dan, yeah, I need to talk to you.
Yeah, okay.
Not
So I
the-
need to
not the-
save this recording, right?
Save it. Save it.
How? I don't know how.
Huh?
Hopefully she'll edit this part out, right?
Do what?
Hopefully she'll edit this part out right now.
Or just turn off the recording.
Just turn it off and then what?
And then somewhere on your computer, there'll be a folder called Zoom,
Okay.
and there will be this recording in it.
Okay. Oh wait, where's the recording now?
What kind of computer are you on? A Mac or a mic?
Oh,
You're on a Mac?
yeah.
Okay, if you go into Documents,
Yeah. Should
there
I
should be
stop the recording up here on the upper left?
yes, stop the recording.